Hey everybody, welcome back to Be a Tech Pro. I'm Kevin. Today we are doing something a little different. We're actually going to do a SQL course. We're going to be using Microsoft SQL Server. You need to have Windows to run this. It can run on a Mac if you have Parallels or VMware, something where you can run Windows on. But it won't run on the M1 Macs or the M2 Macs because SQL Server just doesn't work on there because Microsoft hates ARM. I don't know why. Now, some of you are going to say, actually, SQL Server can run on M1 Mac. It can't. They're talking about SQL Edge, which is a watered down version of SQL Server. It's not the same one that we're using today. So you need to have Windows on either a Windows machine or on a Mac running Parallels or VMware. So the first thing we're going to do is download SQL Server. The link is in the description. And we are going to choose the developer edition. So you can see we have different versions. The Express version is a free version which Microsoft gives you. It has some limitations on how much data you can keep in there. And it's actually a really good version, but I'm going to stick on the developer version because it has some extra features which I like using, and I'm going to be using in some later courses as well. So I'm just going to stick to that for today. So once that's downloaded, it's going to start the installation. You can just follow all the defaults, click next, and just wait for everything to install. Now the next thing we're going to need is SQL Server Management Studio, or what some people call it as SSMS. And this is the program that you're going to use to connect to SQL Server. So we can go again to this link, download it, and follow the defaults to install it. And once it's completed, you should be able to open up SQL Server Management Studio in your start bar. Now, as soon as you open up SQL Server Management Studio, it's going to ask you to connect to a server. So you can just type in localhost, and that will connect to your SQL Server instance on your machine. If not, you can try typing this. It should do the same thing, but localhost should work. So now we're in Management Studio. We're looking at this window. We can see on the left hand side, we have your Object Explorer. We have your query window where you type all your queries over here, and then you have your results set at the bottom. We also have these menus on top. We'll touch on some of them a bit later, but for now we're just going to focus on these three. So the first thing is the Object Explorer. This is going to show all of the objects on SQL Server. So you can see you'll have databases, you'll have tables, stored procedures, you'll have views, all this type of thing. All of that is going to be in the Object Explorer. And as we create things later on, you'll see how it will start showing up on that side as well. This main window over here is your query window. This is where you're going to be typing all your SQL statements. And whenever you execute those statements, it's going to show a result at the bottom of here. It's either going to show it in a grid or it's going to show it in text. Usually this text portion is where you're going to see all your errors, but you can also print and then it will show this data over here. So obviously once you write something in your query window, you have to execute it. So you can by default press F5 on your keyboard. Or what you can do is just go to this button over here, which is execute, and that will actually execute the query for you. So that's really all you have to know about Management Studio for now. Yes, we have the menu on top, but we might look at some of those things a bit later. For now, we really just need to know how to write SQL statements, so let's jump into that. So the first thing that you have to know in SQL Server, you need to have a database to store your data in. So a database is a physical file which will be stored on the server, and that will keep all of your objects, and it will keep your tables, your stored procedures, your views, your functions, all those things in this one file. So that is your database. So we are creating a movie DB because we are creating objects all related to movies today. So let's create that. Okay, so now we've created the movie DB. What we want to do is use that DB. So you can actually just click on the database drop down over here to choose it, or you can actually type in use movie DB and it will see it actually changes it for you. Either way works, it's up to you. So we are creating 4 tables today. We're creating directors, main characters, movies, and movie characters. So in the create table statement, we can see the words create table. We have directors, which is the name of the table. And then we have these braces. So everything in between the braces will be the column names. So the column names, if you think about it, will be the columns that you have in Excel. So when you create Excel, you create a tab, and the tab is going to have different columns in it where you can store the data. So think of it as that. So the first one we have is director ID. We're creating director ID as an int. int is short for integer, which means we can only put numeric values in there. So the primary key is what we use to uniquely identify each record. If you think about a director, each director will have a director ID. In the real world, you might have a ID number or social security number that's going to be unique to you. So that is the same thing as a primary key, so something that's unique to a particular record. We then have director name, and we have director name set as in varchar. I usually just use varchar, but I'm using in varchar here. And then 100 is going to have the length of the string. That means you can't put in a string that's longer than 100 characters. So anything that's 101 characters, it will fail to say it's too big, it can't fit into that column. The next table is the main characters table, which has your character ID and character name. And then we're going on to our movies table. And we can see that also has a movie ID, int primary, so it's an integer with a primary key to make it unique. And we are going to have a title, we're going to have a release year in integer, so that's just going to be the year, so 2003 or 1998 for example. And then we have director ID again. And then after that director ID, we can see we have a constraint which is fk underscore director ID foreign key director ID. And you can see it says references directors and in brackets director ID. So what does this actually mean? So on this line here, we can see we've created director ID. And this bottom portion is now saying this column director ID links to this director ID, this primary key on this directors table over here. So I will come back to what all of that means once I get to the next table. So let's look at the movie characters table, and we can now see that the movie characters table has a movie ID and a character ID. And then we have a constraint pk movie characters primary key, and that's a combination of two fields, so it's a movie ID and a character ID field. Then we have another constraint which is fk movie ID foreign key movie ID, and that's referencing movies movie ID. And then we have another one, fk character ID foreign key character ID, and that references main characters character ID. So how do we actually explain this? Let me actually show you a picture because it will make a little more sense as to what's actually happening over here. So we can see in this picture we have our tables, and like I said, we have our primary key over here, and then we have our foreign keys. What do the foreign keys actually mean? It means that it's now linking one record to another record, to a main record. So generally what we call this is a parent and child. So if you look in this example, you can have a director. Director can have multiple movies, but each movie can only have one director. I think. I'm not sure that's really how it works. So we can see in this particular scenario, we can link these particular movies back to this director. And vice versa, we can say this particular director has directed these movies over here. So that's what this primary key foreign key relationship does. It allows us to link the data so we can see which data actually references each other. So like we said, SQL Server is a relational database because the data actually relates to each other. Now this particular relationship is what we would call a one-to-many. So we can see that one director can have multiple movies, so it's a one-to-many relationship. And sometimes you'll have a scenario where you have table like main characters, for example. You can see that a main character could exist in different movies. But now if you look in the Marvel movies, you can have Iron Man. Iron Man will be in an Iron Man movie, you can be in Avengers movie, you could be in a Captain America movie. So you have a character that can be in multiple movies, right? So you can have one character could be in multiple movies, and obviously each movie can have multiple characters. So this causes a relationship called a many-to-many relationship, which you can't actually do. So if you think about it, in this scenario where we have director and movie, because director is a singular, that's where we put the primary key, and we put the foreign key where we have multiple instances. But in a many-to-many relationship, where do you actually put the foreign key? Because there's going to be multiple either way. So to resolve that, you would normalize this. That's a process that they talk about in database design, and you would put an intersection entity in there, and that intersection table would allow you to create a one-to-many relationship and another one-to-many relationship. So that is where the movie characters table comes in. So you can see that this particular one has two foreign keys. So there's a foreign key for movie ID linking back to the movies table, and then it has another foreign key for character ID linking back to your main characters table. But now another thing people don't tell you is that you can actually use two foreign keys to create a primary key. So that's what's happening on this line here. It takes the movie ID and the character ID to create one primary key, because you won't have the same record of movie 1 and character ID 1 twice in this particular table. Okay, so now we've looked at the actual structure of the table. I think it's time that we actually start putting some data into the table. So we are going to go into our insert statements in the next video.